1 John 3. And in verse 8, John writes, "Behold, what kind of love the Father has given to us, that we should be called children of God." If you're reading in the ESV, it just simply says, "see." So I substituted the King James word, "behold," because I think it's better. Behold is a word that is used to excite attention and admiration. It's like when you're on a hike and you see something incredible and you turn to the people with you and you say, "Look, look, look." It's a word that's meant to stop you in your tracks and arrest you. And I want you to remember tonight as we read these words from John that John was the only one of the disciples that actually saw the sight of Jesus, the Son of God, hung on a cross. And so John wants us to stop in our tracks. He wants this love to captivate us because he says, "Behold." Whenever I think of the word behold, I think of Gandalf with his staff and he's smashing into the ground. Behold. It gets your attention. Behold what? The manner of love. Well, where should we look? Paul helps us, doesn't he? He says, God demonstrated his love in this, that while we were yet sinners, Christ died. Look to the cross. Behold. Let it arrest you. Let it captivate you and stop you in your tracks tonight. And this is my prayer for tonight, that we would never lose the wonder of the cross. That it would never become so familiar to us that we would say, yeah, I've heard that one. I know about that one. Tonight, I want to wonder about it with you, because this word behold is an invitation. It's more than an exclamation. It's an invitation to wonder. And wonder and worship are close allies. And so when John invites us to behold, to wonder at the love of the Father, to look to the cross, he's ultimately inviting a wonder that would lead to worship. The hymn writers understood this, didn't they? They would write things like, "What wondrous love is this, O my soul?" Or, "When I survey the wondrous cross," there's something about what we're gathered tonight to remember and to reflect on that we're supposed to just truly wonder at. And tonight I want to wonder about something concerning the cross. And I wonder if we could wonder together, and I pray that it would lead us to worship. Here's what I wonder tonight. I wonder why Satan would participate in the death of Jesus if he knew that it would mean his defeat. Have you ever wondered that? And just maybe to start, let me just first start by establishing that this is the case, that our enemy, that the devil, Satan, was involved in the events that unfolded on that first Good Friday. Luke chapter 22, verse 3 tells us that in the upper room, when Jesus shared that last Passover meal with his disciples, it says that Satan entered into Judas, who was one of the number of the 12, and led him to betray Jesus. Later on in that same chapter, in Luke chapter 22, verse 53, when they came to arrest Jesus in the garden and his disciples were pulling out their swords saying, "Lord, should we fight? What should we do?" Jesus said, "Put away your swords." And he turned to those that came to arrest him and he said, "Every day I was with you in the temple and you did not lay hands on me. But this is your hour and the power of darkness." Satan was very much involved in the events of what we call Good Friday, but to them was anything but a Good Friday. But have you ever wondered why? Why would he be involved in what would be his own and ultimate defeat? And the suggestion that I want you to wonder with me about tonight is, I wonder if Satan participated in the events of that first Good Friday because he thought that God would never go through with it. Not because he thought God was weak, but because he knew God is love. Wonder about it with me tonight. Satan had seen for himself the infinite, eternal love of God the Father for God the Son. And he saw a love so rich and so full and so free that the love of God the Father for God the Son in God the Spirit overflowed into the creation of the world and of humanity. And what is humanity but the image bearers of God? If you go back to the beginning in Genesis, God is overheard, and what is he saying? Let us make man in our image. God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, perfect love overflowing into the creation of humanity, bearing the image of God. David wondered about this very thing in Psalm 8, when he wondered about the honor and glory that God would give to humanity, being his image bearers. Listen to what David says. He said, "When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you've set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the son of man that you care for him? You have made him a little lower than the heavenly beings and crowned him with glory and honor." Think of the glory and the honor that God gave to his creation there at the beginning. And wouldn't this have filled the heart of Satan with envy? How would his pride have been wounded because he was once an exalted one and had fallen so far, and now God would give his glory to this creation that was created a little lower than angels. Satan himself was an angel. And so how this must have filled his heart with envy. And so how Satan set himself to destroy the image of God. He knew that he was no match for God directly. So what does he do in the garden? He goes after the image of God, the image bearers, to mar the image of the glory of God, to separate and to do what? To break the heart of God. And he does it. What was his temptation to Adam and Eve? You could be like God. Oh, sure, God has crowned you with glory and with honor. He's made you his image bearers. You've come so close. You're sharing in his glory. Why not reach out and take it for yourselves completely? And so Adam and Eve took and they ate and they fell and they rebelled against God. And Satan had won, it seemed, or so he thought. Why? Didn't God say to Adam and Eve, surely in the day that you eat of it, you will what? Surely die. Satan won. They ate. The image bearers of God, marred, separated, the heart of God broken from the glory of his creation. But something happened. Adam and Eve didn't die. What did God do? He clothed them with skins of an animal. An innocent animal was killed in the place of Adam and Eve so that they could be clothed, and sure, because of their sin, they were separated from God, but a promise was made. Do you remember what the promise was? The seed of the woman shall crush the head of Satan, and he shall bruise his heel. And thus began a long history of what it seems would be the evidence that God would not go through with it. Why? Because he said Adam and Eve would die, but they didn't. What about Cain and Abel? Cain kills his brother. According to the law of God, what's he worthy of? Death. But does God kill Cain? No, he spares him. The earth is filled with such wickedness and violence by the time of Noah that God's heart is broken, and so he floods the earth. He judges the wickedness of the earth, but what does he do? He spares Noah and his family. It just seems like God just can't go through with it. And then God makes a friend in Abraham. And there's this really strange story where Abraham and his wife are getting older and older and older, way past the time when people can realistically have children. And yet God promised that Abraham would have a son. And so the day comes, miraculously, the promised son arrives, Isaac, and he's growing up, and Abraham and his wife Sarah are enjoying the promise of God in their son Isaac until the day that God says to Abraham, Abraham, I want you to offer your son to me. I want you to take him up onto the mountain that I show you, and I want you to kill him. And can you believe? I mean, it's in the Bible, we've read it a million times, but just try to think about it for just a moment, if you even can fathom it, that Abraham believed God to the degree that he would walk in the kind of faith that would make him obedient even to this. And so he takes his son, Isaac. Don't think of a little boy. Think of a young man who probably could have either outran or outmuscled his dad. But he allows himself to be bound and to be laid on the altar. And he asks his father, what are you doing? Why don't we have a sacrifice? We're building this altar. I see the wood. I see the fire. I see the knife. Where's the offering? Abraham binds his son. He lays him on the altar. He lifts up the knife to go through with it. And what? The angel of the Lord says, stop. And God provides a ram. See, it just doesn't seem like God's really ever going to go through with it. He comes close at times, but maybe to make the point or to make it dramatic or so that people could see, but he never really goes through with it. And through the descendants of Abraham, he raises up a nation in Israel, keeping his promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And right away, they're a sinful people. They're a people that keep rebelling against God. And it seems like there's no way that a holy, perfect God could dwell among a people like this. But what does God do? He makes a way. He institutes through Moses a sacrificial system so that the sinners themselves don't have to pay the price for their own rebellion against God, but they could bring a lamb, they could bring a dove, they could bring a bull, they could bring an animal that would be slain in their place, and God would accept it on their behalf as a substitute. And you go on through Israel's history, right? If you know anything about it, all the ups and downs of God's people, all the times that they turned away, even the times when it seemed like God was through with them and he would allow them in his judgment to be carried away into captivity, what would God always do? He would always make a way. He would always bring them back. He would always save a remnant. And it just seems like if you look at the history from creation on, all the way through with God's people, it's like God, he just never seems like he's fully ever going to go through with it. And then the unthinkable happens. Through Israel, through Abraham, through the seed of David, God becomes a man. Born as a baby. Maybe now this is Satan's opportunity. Oh, the Son of God who came to die. Let's see if God will go through with it. And so Herod gives the decree, every child under the age of 3 is to be put to death. Let's see if the Son of God will die. Let's see if God will go through with it. Does he? No, the boy escapes to Egypt with his family. God provides a way of escape. What about Jesus' ministry? How many times were they plotting against Jesus as a man in his ministry? They picked up stones to stone him, and yet he walked through the crowd and no one touched him. They grabbed hold of him in his hometown of Nazareth to throw him off a cliff because they were so ticked off about what he was saying. But he passes through the crowd unharmed. How many times did they plot against him? How many times were they looking to find a trap so they might kill him? And yet over and over again, the Son of God, God who became a man, a way is made for him to not have to go through with it. And at first, it seems like Satan is trying to keep Jesus from going to the cross. Remember in the wilderness, he's tempting him. Just turn these stones to bread. Just throw yourself off the temple and fulfill when God says that he won't allow your foot to be dashed against the rocks. Just bow your knee to me and receive all the kingdoms of the world. You don't have to do it through your death. You don't have to go through the cross. You don't have to go through with it. Satan tempts Jesus in the wilderness. Satan tempts Jesus through Peter's protest. You remember when Jesus said, "And now the Son of Man must go and be turned over into the hands of the Pharisees to be killed." And Peter says, "Far be it from you, Lord." And what does Jesus say? "Get behind me, Satan." At first, it seems like Satan was trying to keep Jesus from going to the cross, but something shifts. And I wonder about it. Because at some point, it seems like Satan goes all in. He enters into Judas to betray Jesus. Jesus in the garden says, "Now is the hour of darkness." And I wonder, why? And it seems to me that Satan, knowing that he couldn't deter Jesus from the path that was leading him to the cross anymore, grew more desperate, and he went all in thinking, surely God will not go through with this. The death of his own son. He never has. In all of history, he's never gone through with it. And there's no way that he would choose people like you and me over his own son. When it really comes down to it, do you think God would choose us over his son? See, because in the end, it wasn't just that Jesus died. It's how he died. The way he was betrayed. The way he was abandoned. The way he was rejected. The way he was despised. The way he was put to such open shame and humiliation. The way he was mocked and tortured. The way that he suffered. Perhaps Satan's heart filled with false confidence when he heard Jesus praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, Father, is there any other way? Please take this cup from me. Perhaps that was the point the enemy went all in and said, he won't go through with it. And it was as if when you read the accounts of Jesus' death, when you think about what we're here tonight to remember, it's as if Satan was pouring it on with such pure evil that he was counting on the fact that there's no way the Father would stand by and watch this. Surely he would intervene. Surely he would stop this. Surely he would do something. And do you remember that was at the very end what they were taunting Jesus with as he hung on the cross? Do you remember they said to him, if you're really God's son, prove it. Come down. Because there's no way that God would let his son go through this. And the incredible thing is that though time and time and time and time again through history, God made a way. He provided a lamb, a way of escape, an ark in the flood. Though time and time again, God, when Abraham raised the knife, said stop. This time when the knife was raised over the heart of his own son, he went through with it. And so John says, behold, what manner of love the Father has given to us, that we would be called the children of God, that God would give his own son that we might become his sons and daughters. See, this is what Satan never counted on. And tonight I invite you to wonder at the wisdom of God. The wisdom of God, the pure wisdom of God. That way back in the beginning when Satan tempted man and said, you could become like God, he never would have guessed that God would become a man and go through with it so that we could become his sons and daughters. Behold, no, look. Behold, what manner of love the Father has given to us, that we should be called his children. May we never lose the wonder there can be no greater love than this. Would you pray with me?